Hi everyone, it's 3:30. We're going to get started today. Hopefully everyone can hear me, so just type something in the chat pod as we go along if you have any questions. Today we're going to be talking about Ansiblefest and some of our experts' favorite sessions from Ansiblefest, which was just about 3 weeks ago, and we're going to get into that a little bit more. I thought I would start really fast by showing just this quick video that's on the Ansiblefest website, kind of introducing what Ansiblefest is about this year.
Each day, we live and work in unique personal spheres. Some are familiar or traditional, some surprising and unorthodox. But facing new challenges means that nothing stays the same forever. It's time to stop feeling stuck in our circles and work harder to connect them. Technology makes things faster, easier, and more possible. Automation helps change how we do business, so we don't have to be afraid to embrace change to achieve our goals. It's time to adapt, innovate, and overcome together. It's time to bridge where you are to where you want to go. Are you ready to connect, create, innovate, and automate? Ansiblefest 2020. Automate to connect.
So just a little bit about if you didn't register for Ansiblefest yet, or if you want to help somebody else get in there, all of the recorded sessions from Ansiblefest are available for a year. I'm just going to show you real quickly how to get in there. The website is ansible.com/Ansiblefest. If you haven't registered, you can still register and access the content, or if you have a login already, you can just go in there and go in. They have different channels you can follow if you're interested in a specific topic area. You can view the keynotes, you can hit the highlights, you can save things for later, and all of this is available for a year. So definitely worth going back and checking out. And if you don't know where to start, that's why our experts are here today, to give you an idea of which sessions they feel like are the best to hit and to start with. So I wanted to turn it over to Matt Wren for a few minutes. He's going to talk about Moser and Red Hat and our partnership and introduce our speakers for today.
Thanks, Melinda. Hi, everybody. Like Melissa said, my name is Matt Wren. I am the Managing Director of Business Development here at Moser Consulting. If you have not heard of Moser Consulting, we've been in business actually next year, 25 years, headquartered in Indianapolis, Indiana, where we have 2 offices, as well as have an office out in Baltimore, Maryland, and have over 250 consultants spread out across the U.S. The majority of us are in Indianapolis and Baltimore, but we do have some outside. Within our Red Hat partnership, I've been lucky to be able to be a part of this for over 6 years with them, and seeing how it's grown. We are an Apex partner, which means we're able to help you with subscriptions, of buying those and understanding those, as well as being a system integrator. Within the system integrator, we were lucky enough last year to be named the 2020 SI of the Year for small, medium-sized business. And we've continued to grow our partnership with Red Hat and entered into the Red Hat Partner Cloud Solution Program, which we do have Ansible in our product called Honeycomb. Outside of that, Moser has 7 practices from application development, business services, enterprise data services, learning services, managed services, system and cloud, and data analytics. So with that said, I'd love to introduce Jim Garrett, one of my really good friends at Red Hat. Enjoy a lot of times with Jim. So Jim, from there, I'll let you take it away, sir.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Matt. Let me share my screen really fast. Well, first of all, thanks for coming to this session today. Again, my name is Jim Garrett. I'm a Principal Solution Architect at Red Hat. If you wanted to contact me at any point in time and ask questions, I've put my name on this slide, so jgarrett@redhat.com. Feel free to reach out. I'll answer any questions that you send my way. But what I'd like to talk today about is just, there were a couple things at Ansiblefest which really stuck out and sunk in as far as being what I call pretty cool new technologies, just new things that we're doing with Ansible. And those things are, we're going to talk about what's called execution environments, talk about some of the background information on that, challenges that people face with Ansible. I'm also going to talk about something not listed on this slide, but it's called advanced cluster management with Ansible. But first of all, let me just kind of talk about one of the challenges, one of the main challenges in the past when working with Ansible was making sure all your dependencies were already installed and ready. So historically, developers, you could write your Ansible content locally. You could then install dependencies in a directory on their computer. And then when it came time to move or run that Ansible playbook, like on, let's say, a development or a test or production, sometimes you actually had to do things like submit a help desk ticket in order to get something installed. So the challenge was that process wasn't very repeatable. It wasn't very consistent. And in order to solve that problem, we have created something today which we're calling Ansible Collections. Now, with Ansible Collections, the difference is, so a developer is still going to write that content locally. And then what they do is they're going to take that local content and it's going to get pushed into what we call a container. I don't know if you guys are familiar with containers, but it is one of the latest ingenious ways to take things in your operating system and to put them into a self-contained unit, which really makes that self-contained unit very portable. So basically, containers provide developers the ability to take and share these prepackaged environments. You can then test them locally and then easily copy them or promote them into other environments like test or production. And the end result is once you've containerized that Ansible playbook, is you have the ability to streamline all of your development and all of your deployment operations by simplifying and automating this old process that we have. Now, the collections workflow, the way that collections work, we start off with something called, and these are actually new products. We have something called Ansible Builder, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. We've got the Ansible Runner. It's what you use to test these containers. And then you can easily copy these containers into production. And in the spring release of the Ansible automation platform, we're also going to have execution environments that you can run or that you can use to run these jobs inside of Ansible Tower. And by the way, if you want to go out on the internet and look and read more about Ansible Collections, you can see the link right here on ansible.com/blog/getting started with Ansible Collections. Let's talk a little bit about Ansible Builder first. So the Builder is basically a command line tool that's going to aid you in the creation of these execution environments. And what Ansible Builder does is it's going to produce this portable, self-contained environment that you can use to execute Ansible. And if you know anything about containers, then you've probably heard of Podman and Docker. Those are the default, de facto standard containers that people use. So Ansible Builder is compatible with both Podman and Builder. Now, once you have built your container, the next thing you do is you want to pass it off to what's called the Ansible Runner. And the Runner is a tool, and it's also a Python library that can help you when interfacing with Ansible directly, or even as part of another system, whether that's through a container image interface, or as a standalone tool, or even as a Python module that you import in. But the goal with Ansible Runner, again, is to provide a stable and consistent interface to Ansible. So what this does is it allows Ansible to be embedded into other systems that don't want to manage the complexities of the interface on their own. For example, if you have a CI/CD platform using Jenkins or some other automated tool, you can actually embed this Ansible Runner into these other systems. So if you've ever used Ansible Tower, Ansible Runner is actually a part of Tower. In fact, Ansible Runner represents the part of Ansible Tower that's responsible for running Ansible and Ansible playbooks. And it also gathers the output information from the execution of that playbook. And with Ansible Runner, what it does is it does this by presenting a common interface that doesn't change even as Ansible itself grows and evolves. So part of what makes this tooling useful is that it can gather its input in a very flexible way. And after executing this playbook, it has a system for storing the output and all of the artifacts of the playbook. Now you can do a lot with that information. You can take that output and you can push it to various logging capabilities. But again, the picture you need to draw in your mind is just like inside of Ansible Tower, if you run that playbook and it produces a log, well, that logging information is the exact same thing that Ansible Runner produces. Now I've got a couple of examples on running an Ansible playbook without Runner. So again, this is a playbook. Maybe internal to this playbook, it's trying to execute a module called the Red Hat Openshift K8S, which stands for Kubernetes. And again, if you've not installed that particular module in this environment, then Ansible is just going to produce an error. And it's going to say, there's an offending line in this code. We don't know how to process this. In comparison, if you were to run Ansible Runner and you give it think of the Ansible Runner container called Playbook, passing in the exact same test.yaml file or playbook file. Again, now this particular module exists inside of that container, and the Ansible Runner can automatically find it, and you didn't have to do any special installation to make that happen. Here's another example. Maybe you want to just run the Ansible command. You want to run it against localhost, and you want to give it the name of the module. Again, it's that same module, redhat.openshift.k8s. And again, it says module not found. In comparison to running that exact same command using Ansible Runner, it'll automatically find that information for you. If you want to see any documentation or read information about these various pieces of the puzzle, Ansible Builder and Ansible Runner, I've documented it, and of course we'll make this available to you after the meeting, so you can just click on the links. But with that being said, let me branch to one of the other topics that we talked about at Ansiblefest. And this topic actually kind of branches across Ansible and our container platform product, which is called Openshift. So a lot of people are already aware of containers. Containers have definitely taken our ecosystem by storm. If you know anything about containers, the first thing you learn is that they need someone or something to orchestrate them. So you may have a container, for example, that runs, let's say, a Node.js application or a PHP application. And you want to be able to basically deploy that application into your cloud or into your cluster. Well, the tool that allows someone to do that is called Kubernetes. So Kubernetes comes into the picture, and its purpose is to provide an enterprise-grade engine that's used to orchestrate everything about that container deployment. Red Hat OpenShift is the container platform that we've created that unites containers with the Kubernetes orchestration engine. What that means is inside of OpenShift, we've written tens of thousands of lines of code that leverage the Kubernetes API in order to bring together these two frameworks. And what this actually does is it provides a container platform that can span multiple clouds across multiple regions and across multiple availability zones, all while providing for multi-tenancy and disaster recovery. So this feature on its own, the feature of combining containers with the orchestration engine, is a monumental step forward for anybody who's wandering down that container path. And obviously at Red Hat, we've developed an extremely robust product that provides that true enterprise level container management. And it's this aspect which has launched our Openshift container platform into a new stratosphere. And let me explain why that is. So what exactly is this new stratosphere? Well, in the past, if we had an Openshift cluster, you could architect it so that it worked across multiple clouds. However, most of the implementations we did were delegated across the same cloud ecosystem. For example, everything was on AWS or everything was on Google Cloud. With the latest release of Openshift, we can now span across multiple cloud partners seamlessly. We literally have cluster fragments where you could have one fragment on AWS, you could have a second fragment on Google, a third fragment on Microsoft Azure, or many other cloud providers. So what I mean by this is we can have one Openshift installation that can dynamically grow to include worker nodes deployed in clusters across cloud platforms. So in this picture that you see on my screen, you see that it describes how this might look, where you maybe have one F5 router servicing containers spread across separate cloud vendors. Now, if you've ever looked at any one of the cloud vendors, if you've ever gone out to AWS or Google and you've tried to configure them manually, you learn very quickly that it's very challenging. Imagine how challenging it is to try to spread your containers across multiple cloud vendors. To do that, you need a management tool, a tool that's robust enough to facilitate the distinct cloud environments and to understand how they work. What we call that is the advanced cluster management challenges. So in Openshift terms, there's a brand new feature called advanced cluster management, which allows us to take simple containers and administrate them across an Openshift cluster that can span multiple clouds. And with this, you're going to get components like controlling the cluster configuration drift, consistent cluster provisioning, single pane of glass visibility into all those pieces. You know, as you can imagine, this is an extremely challenging requirement for us to facilitate. And you're probably asking yourself the question, okay, Jim, how does that play into Ansible? Well, with Ansible, we answered the challenge. We took all of those various pieces of cluster management, pieces like networking, database installation, load balancing, deploying of worker nodes, all of those very, very distinct pieces where if you do it on AWS, it's done one way. If you do it on Google, it's done another way. Ansible has the ability to create consistent, repeatable playbooks that are capable of turning these highly complex and repetitive tasks into simple, modernized automation scripts. So with Ansible, we have the playbooks that understand the nuances of each individual cloud provider. And these playbooks can be used to configure the networks, the databases, the load balancers, the firewalls for any of the cloud providers that we have. So now with Ansible Advanced Cluster Management, we can provide a unified cluster management experience. We can define policy-based governance. We can define the advanced application lifecycle. And we can provide observability into all of your clusters that are running Openshift. So now with Ansible, the advanced cluster management task of defining your security, your network topology, your configuration management, all of those pieces can be simplified by using Ansible to do it. So you can see that basically Ansible provides that link, that missing link, that now if we have a scenario where today our container platform is running on-premise, but tomorrow we want to branch out into the cloud, we can run an Ansible playbook that simply provisions that cloud instance, for example, AWS. It adds it to our Openshift cluster. And maybe you have a scenario where today AWS is cheaper, but tomorrow Google is cheaper. Well, tomorrow they can add a Google subcloud or subcluster into the OpenShift container platform and start running with it. So again, I thought that was a really cool feature, a cool implementation of Ansible, and that's why I wanted to talk about it today. If you want to read more about that, again, I've included a link. This talks a lot about the advanced cluster management for Kubernetes and how Ansible can help facilitate that. And with that, I'll turn it over to the next person to speak. I think, is it Lewis? Lewis, are you up next?
I am. It's my turn for the excitement. I'll go and introduce myself. I'm Lewis Gordner. I'm a principal consultant and Ansible architect with Moser Consulting. I spend 95% of my day doing Ansible and Anger, and I have been doing so for the past 5 years. I consistently enjoy going to Ansiblefest, and even though it's virtually this year, they did an excellent job of making it consumable. They're 30-minute sessions. They're quick hits as far as your content goes, and the ability to go and read more or dig more in if you're interested is pretty available to you. So I recommend it completely. And because they're so small chunks, you're not committed to an hour-and-a-half presentation or something like that. So I looked at these four. There are many that are good. All of what Jim was talking about is, of course, excellent. And if you've got a specific, there's a bunch of network ones, there's a bunch of security ones, there's a bunch of that are specific, but I'll talk about the ones that are here specifically. One of the things that a lot of my clients struggle with is how do they manage their content at an enterprise level, an enterprise-wide environment, while not making it publicly accessible? Because while we all know we don't put significantly proprietary information into source control, we don't put passwords in there, we don't put usernames in there, we generally don't even put IP addresses in there into your Ansible code. That said, you still a lot of times want to manage it privately. You don't want to publish it to the internet. So of course you're going to be using source control, but how do you make it so that the network team and the Windows team and the Linux team can all access ServiceNow or Jira at the same time? Well, you want to have a way to manage your private content and make it available for the rest of your teams to use. So what they've done is they've taken the Ansible Automation Hub, which is at cloud.redhat.com, and the future state will be on-prem, but current state allows you to upload your items there as part of a service catalog, but still maintain the privacy and role-based access control to that information. So it's hugely powerful. And if you haven't already taken a look at what cloud.redhat.com can provide, if you're a RHEL customer or if you're an automation customer, and Tom can speak to it about Openshift, but specifically for RHEL, they have Red Hat Insights as part of RHEL. If you own it, Insights is available to you for free and integrates incredibly well with Ansible. And then the Ansible Automation Analytics, it allows you to get a real-time understanding of what your return on investment is for your automation, even across multiple tower environments or multiple data centers. So that's always worth a gander at. To enable self-service automation, so as we all know, if we're looking at automation, that's kind of the holy grail, right? How can I set it up so the end user can do something complex without my involvement, and I know it's going to be done right, and I know only the correct people are going to be using it, and I know that it's going to be done in a way that's consistent with all of my policies and procedures? Well, Ansible will be able to enable you to do everything in compliance with your policies and procedures, et cetera, but ServiceNow or the equivalent front end, it doesn't have to be ServiceNow, it's anything that can make an API call. So if you have something homebrew, if you've got, even Jira Forms, whatever you have for your self-service platform, Ansible can enable that in a number of ways. Some of the classic workflows include ServiceNow gets a ticket opened by the monitoring system to say that Java is down on X host. Well, it'll open the ticket, it'll trigger Ansible automation to go and validate that Java is down on that host. If it's down, restart it, and then validate that it's up. And then it'll update the ticket with the fact that, hey, we've restarted Java on this server and we've validated that it's up and running again. All without bothering your admins overnight. Now, do you set up rules in ServiceNow that say, hey, we've done this 3 times, we should escalate? Absolutely. But that's the kind of thing that it allows you to get handled. Or somebody creates a ServiceNow ticket that says, I need a firewall port open. Oh, well, you need the firewall port open. What are the servers? The servers are in dev. Okay, well, that's a standard change. Let's go for it. Or it's an approved change. Either way, the change can occur after approval and the ticket get updated and closed, all without the network team's involvement because they've written the code that enabled the change. So that's a definitely good look. It allows you to really optimize any return on investment with Ansible because you can pull the infrastructure folks out of the conversation before they ever have to get into it on all of your standard changes and all of the piddly stuff that nobody wants to have to go through over and over again. On the same front, security is a thing that we all deal with, right? Even if you're in a free-form environment where you've got no compliance requirements, through something where you have to implement the full DIS-a-STIG, we have to do security. And automating that security validation and automating platform changes and network changes and all the pieces that are required as part of security can be done easily with Ansible. In fact, most of it's already written if you're using a standard security baseline. So adding that automation into your development cycle is well worth doing. Because if you've ever been an admin where you've had to add security later, you know that you get pushback every time a developer does something. So putting security in at the beginning means that the developers are working with it from the very beginning and we're not playing guessing games on what we're doing, right? I mean, that's really the key component. And then as Jim talked about, the possibilities around creating and using execution environments, Adam Miller is one of the presenters on this, and Adam has I can't speak today apparently, but an inimitable style. He's very, very good. And execution environments are something that we deal with. We deal with the complications from it quite a bit in Tower because you end up having to have a whole bunch of libraries and packages and everything installed so you can use all the parts and pieces of the extended Ansible module set. And to be able to use execution environments gives you a couple of different opportunities. One, if you already have an Openshift infrastructure or a container infrastructure of any form, you can minimize the size of your Tower cluster and push all your execution onto the Openshift cluster, and then you're dynamically scaling. So you don't maintain this large Tower infrastructure for things that don't happen as often, right? Additionally, it provides just an unbelievable amount of flexibility in how you do it. There was one more that didn't quite make the list, but gets an honorable mention on accelerating your modules. And so they've written a new type of module integration for Python that may or may not be fully integrated, but certainly is available, that can rapidly accelerate repeated API calls or things like that. So if you're doing ServiceNow integration, if you're doing Kubernetes, KDS work, if you're doing VMware work, if you're doing AWS work, that's all API calls. And so every time Python fires up, it has to spin up all those libraries again and again. And we don't want to do that if we can avoid it. So the Turbo module allows us to reuse the already spun up modules from the last call, which can significantly, by 80 or 90%, reduce the amount of time it takes to run each task. So if you combine those two things, you can get an incredibly powerful, incredibly fast implementation of Ansible execution. So those are my top 4 hits. They're by no means the only. I've yet to see a session that was terrible. So I recommend working through them. And because they're all available and they're all easy to stream, you get choices. As always, I'm available for questions, but I will pass that off to our Openshift Guru.
All right. Thanks, Louis. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tom Lapp. I'm a principal consultant here at Moser. I am the technology lead for DevOps. I'm mostly a Red Hat infrastructure guy with primary focus on containers and container orchestration platforms in Red Hat OpenShift. So I've been using Ansible for about 5 years now. I dabble in it a little more or a little less than I do it in anger, as Louis does, so to speak. I do end up using it quite a bit every day or every week to accomplish things. I'll echo certainly what Louis said about the quality of Ansiblefest this year for having been put on as a virtual conference. I noticed that there were quite a few high-level individuals that were giving some presentations. My first presentation that I'm highlighting here is the Ansible by pull request and Ansible Git Ops story. Most of the sessions that I focused on had a bit of DevOps or CI/CD sort of focus to them, and this one's no exception. This was a presentation given by Timothy Abnell, who's the senior product manager for Ansible. So he's just got lots of experience with Ansible, and has been a user of it for many years, and now he's all the way up at the product manager level for it. This talk was great. It gives you a little bit of background about Git Ops and what it is, sort of managing things through, Git. checking code in, kicking off automated builds, more automated production operations, as opposed to doing things more manually. So he goes through a nice little background about Git Ops, sort of where it started, where it came from. And then he talks a little bit about the old way of automating Ansible jobs with, CI/CD pipelines, which was traditionally done with a tool like Jenkins or Circle CI or something like that, where those automation platforms were kicking off Ansible jobs or running Ansible playbooks themselves. The new way, which is sort of, the big piece here, was the integration of the automation webhooks in Tower. And so what this does is this allows you to set up those webhooks like you did in your regular CI/CD tool, Jenkins or whatever. But now you can set them up in Tower, and you can have Tower, running those Ansible jobs for you when it sees, Git commits or pushes or things like that. So this was a really neat presentation showing off, the automation webhooks that are now available in Tower. So I really enjoyed that one. The next one was continuous testing with Molecule, Ansible, and GitHub Actions. Again, another CI/CD, pipeline, continuous integration type talk. This one was given by Jeff Geerling. Jeff is pretty well known in the Ansible community. He's written just an absolute ton of Ansible Galaxy content and roles and things like that are all, of course, now getting moved over to the collections and things like that. But this was a really nice talk with a demo and sort of walkthrough of how to automate your testing of playbooks and things like that. So when you're writing new playbooks and you check them in to Git, you can have GitHub Actions that will kick off Molecule testing. So the Molecule testing is really neat. He implements it with container running, container to execute those playbooks in. They have convergence and verification steps. So again, this was just another really great talk to show you another place where you can integrate some CI automation into your deployment or development and deployment process. Because the last thing you want to do is, check in playbooks that don't work and have something break. So it's just, this was a really great testing step to see in action and how he has that implemented. So I really like that one. The next one, managing guests with REST-based modules for VMware vSphere. I run into VMware a lot, and a lot of customers that are running their OpenShift clusters on-prem are doing that on top of VMware. And so when we are provisioning clusters and managing clusters, we certainly like to do that using tools like Ansible to manage the underlying guest VMs on those platforms. So this talk highlights a couple of things. One is the collections, right? So since collections has come out, a lot of the vendors have released their own collections that interact with their product lines very well. There were some older community VMware modules and things, but the collections are just sort of much more refined. And because VMware is building them, they're able to certainly test them better against a lot more of the edge cases and things like that exist within their API. This talk also did sort of go over some of the highlights of the REST API that VMware implemented in the vSphere 6.0 and beyond line, which just has made it possible for Ansible and other tools, automation tools, to interact better through the API. So this was a really nice talk. Had a nice demo of basically creating a VM, starting it up, stopping it, and even removing it. So lots of things that you can do with the VMware REST API and the new VMware collection. And then the final one that I'm going to highlight is this doing container security the right way with Ansible. So this kind of covered. They crammed a lot into this talk. And it gives you a lot of things to follow up with because there was so much content. Everything from using Ansible during your container builds to obviously not only build consistent and repeatable containers, but to do things like secure them, applying baseline configurations and compliance checks and things like that to them. Everything from registry management to Kubernetes cluster management, things like Kube Spray is for deploying clusters, cluster scaling, integrating other security products and things into your cluster, to using Ansible to deploy those into your cluster and things like that. They also touched on the Red Hat Advanced Cluster Manager integrations, which Jim overviewed earlier in this talk. And so lots and lots of different things that they're leveraging Ansible to do for their whole container ecosystem, from the container image builds themselves all the way through to the container management platform. They had 2 demos that were pretty good. A CIS compliance scan of the Kubernetes cluster. So this goes out and it basically scans your entire Kubernetes cluster for all of the CIS compliance issues and configuration issues that might be there. And then they also had an image, a container image scanning demo where they went out and scanned individual images to look for security vulnerabilities or configuration errors or things like that in the containers. So those were the 4 that I found very interesting. Like I said, most of them DevOpsy, CI/CD type things. Overall, again, I would just echo what Lewis said. Lots of great sessions. Find some that you're interested in and go out and watch them, because there's a lot of good information out there. And I'll hand it back to Melinda, I think.
All right. Yep, we're here. So everyone, if you have any questions for any of our panelists, you can type it into the chat. We did record this session. We will be sending out an email to everyone who signed up in case you want to go back in the recording and see any of the info again. But again, go to ansible.com/Ansiblefest and find these great sessions. Thank you for coming today.